Snap.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Parshat, you got it? Got this book? Yep.
There's a whole part of it.
Okay, so we're gonna. This week's Parshat is Parshat Va'era. I'll make a little introduction. Actually, no. What we'll do is we'll start with this week's Parshat just because I don't want to confuse everyone. Yeah, take that one because we're gonna go back to it in a few minutes.
Love the chair.
Yeah. Let me see which one you got there. No, not that one.
This one.
Yep, that one. Okay, so.
Fine.
Just as a start, we know that in this week's parsha we already start seeing the 10 makot, makot, and the 10 plagues. And as an introduction to the first Torah that we're gonna do, the Baal Leshem, the Rav Eliashiv's grandfather, who was known as a big Mekubal. He wrote the Leshem Shovavim. He writes a very, very wonderful piece in.
You know the chair.
Yeah, that's right. He writes a beautiful piece about the Eser Makot, and the question that he asks is really a question that many people ask: is when we have the Aseret HaMakot, we are split up differently. The logic would state just like the Aseret HaDibrot, there would be 5 and 5, right? Very standard kind of split. We know that in this week's parsha we have 7 Makot in this week's parsha, and next week we have 3. So the Leshem and many Mefarshim ask the question as to why the Torah splits up the Makot this way, and he offers a unique answer, but it also connects to what we're about to the Torah that we're going to do. So he says that the Eser Makot, we know not only did the Eser Makot. He mentions it this way. He says that the Eser Makot, each one of the Makot, their job was to be mivatel, to cancel out one of the Koach HaTumah that was in Mitzrayim. And not only that, but it was also to reveal a Koach of Kedusha that it took place. Now, what do we know about the Eser Sfirot? This is based on the Baal Leshem Shvuah Achona. He says that what do we know about the Eser Sfirot? They're divided by 7 and 3. And he says that the 7 that were the first 7 correspond to each one of the midot, corresponds to each one of the Sfirot. And he says the last one of the Sfirot, which is what? Keter. Right, that's the one. It corresponds to the 10th Makkah, which is Makat Bechorot, which is the one that Hashem does himself, because no one really can achieve that. So now he puts in this beautiful idea of now we understand why the breakdown of 7 and 3. The 7 of this week's parsha are really ones that are there to connect things that are much more, let's call it, natural, if you will. And the next week's parsha, the other 3 are much harder to recreate. And then next week's you don't even see the sorcerers or whatever you call them, they don't even get involved next week's parsha. This week they're already sort of involved, they're sort of halfway involved. So he mentioned this beautiful piece. Now, the question, with that introduction, he asks, the Zera Shimshon has a beautiful, I'm jumping in the middle of Makat Arov. We know what Makat Arov is, if we look at the different Makot, let's start it this way, let's ask this way before we introduce it this way, and then we'll go to the actual Zera Shimshon. So the question is like this: every one of the Makot is straightforward. The name is Dam. We know that there's blood, right? Kinim. The only Makkah that doesn't have the name of the actual Makkah is Arov, right? It should have been called what? Animals, right? Wild beast, a chayot, something. It should have been called something to make it follow this order or follow the pattern.
What's Arov?
Arov means Arov
mixture,
means mixture, right? So most people, the Ibn Ezra says Irbuvia means a mix-up, like mash-up, right? So that doesn't follow it follows, but if we were really looking at the Makot, we should be saying is that Arov should have been called chayot, right? Because there was just wild beasts. So there has to be something beyond just the Arov that means something deeper for us to be able to say why the Makkah is named different. So now if we go to Drush 9, Drush Tet, and if you look in Drush 11. Drush Aleph, excuse me.
This is in Beshalach?
Yeah, no, this is in Va'era. I'm sorry, Va'era.
Back in Va'era.
Va'era. We're going to Beshalach in a second. We're going to do that one in a second. But I wanted to stay with the first one. Now, in the middle of, towards the end actually,
Of Yud Aleph?
Towards the end of Yud Aleph, there's one that says Od B'derech Acher.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Page Taf
No.
Reish Aleph.
Taf Reish Aleph in Va'era. Parshat Va'era, Drush Yud Aleph.
Yes.
That is Chad?
Straight from Williamsburg. No. Yeah, so Drush Yud Aleph in Parshat Va'era. So one of the things that the Zera Shimshon does throughout the Makot, and it's beautiful the way he connects them, but he's going to Drush Yud Aleph. He mentions in every one of the Makot, he mentions the idea of Midah Keneged Midah. We know that's a famous idea that what the Egyptians were trying to do, they kind of, Hashem did the opposite or did something to kind of, I guess counterbalance or kind of punish them for something that they did. And now he's going to, the Zera Shimshon, where it says, Od B'derech Acher. So, if we see what he's picking up on, the pasuk that he's picking up on, before I give a little introduction to the piece that we're going to do, but what he's picking up on is the pasuk says, Umalu batei Mitzrayim et ha'arov v'gam ha'adama asher him alea. So he says, if we read the pasuk, it says that the arov will fill your houses and the ground underneath the animals. Okay?
Let's go to the
No?
You have a Skoda?
Yes.
A black one?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Everybody's doing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he says. Anyway, so he says that the pasuk says, "Umalu batei Mitzrayim et ha'arovet gam ha'adama asher him alea." Even the ground that they're on is going to be filled. Is going to be coming. The way the pasuk reads, which doesn't make sense. It says that your house is going to be filled with animals and the ground that's underneath it. So, with that introduction, we're going to go to towards the end. It says Od B'derech Acher. So now it says Od B'derech Acher. And he asked a question. He's going now to ask a question. Why was the Makkah of Arov brought up upon the Egyptians at all? That's question number one. The question number two is he's going to ask is how were they actually impacted by it, and how can we see this from the description in the Torah itself? So he says like this. Od b'derech acher, umalu batei Mitzrayim et ha'arov. The houses of the Egyptians were filled with this arov, whatever they are, and even the ground that they were under, even the ground that they were on was also part of it. And you have to remember the idea of arov is to completely, it's let's call it chaos, confusion, something like that. It's not the standard just wild beasts. We think it's wild beasts. It's not wild beasts, because if it was just wild beasts, then the makkah would be called chayot. It's not, and it's got to be something else beyond that.
Arov could be from like Le'arbev.
But even if it was Le'arbev, so then what is the Erbuv, right? So in other words, let's think we're in the jungle for a second, right? Bears, lions, tigers, when they go in a jungle, right? Oh my, right?
Snakes, whatever.
Right, whatever. So they usually don't. Usually what happens is if bears are there and lions are there, right? Other animals don't want to be near them, right? In other words, because they're so scared of them, right? Here we're saying is that all these wild beasts were in Mitzrayim at the same time, and they were all mixed up, and something was going on. So there's obviously something deeper that's going on. So he says like this. So why did Hashem bring the makkah, the plague of the wild beasts? Meaning he brought a variety of different animals. Right? Different, consisting of different kind of animals. Right? It was only because of the reason that the Midrash says that. Because what do we know about it? That in the Midrash, he introduces it beforehand. The Midrash says that the Egyptians, at a time, as one of the ways to enslave the Jews, they made them go capture lions, tigers, bears, whatever it is, and made them forced to capture them. Right? Right? It would have been enough had Hashem just did what he would have just said is okay. Instead of you're making the Jews capture these animals. So I'm just going to send them in the wild into Mitzrayim. There's got to be something deeper here. Why do we have to have such a different kind of mixture? What's the point here? And this is even a deeper question. He says is why did the Egyptians not bothered to attempt to imitate Moshe. He performed when he performed the other makot. But here, Moshe, why didn't he try? Why didn't they try? In all the other makot, we know that the sorcerers or whatever we're calling the Chartumim, they tried to at least mimic or copy Moshe or Aaron, depending on what the makah was. But here, they don't do anything.
Right.
This is the first makah; they don't even get involved. So he's asking. So far, he's v'afal pisha b'makata k'moshe asu b'rishonot. V'afal pisha b'makata kinim lo yachlu damot.
Is that anyone's blue car, double park? Do you mind moving it, bud? Thank you.
Second time.
Sorry, man.
What with these people on Kituma Court?
Yeah,
They do
seriously.
whatever they want.
We need more parking. We need more parking spaces. No, anyway. So he says. So even though they were unable to do it. Even though they were unable to makat kinim, they were unable to actually copy it. But
They still attempted.
right, hayalem lasot k'mishar makot. They should have.
Say is that beyond Hashem.
Hold on, we're going to get to that in a second. Very good. So now he says they should have attempted at least to do it when before the other, right? That is that they should have had a renewed attempt to do it every time we bring a makkah. So he says, just right every time they Paro and the sorcerers, what do? They kind of hardened their heart. They said, "We tried, we can't do it. At least we tried." Here, he doesn't even try. So there's obviously the Zera Shimshon is going on a direction of something's going on here, that the arov is much deeper than just a mixture of animals, because the mixture of animals in of itself doesn't make sense, because the animals would never go together. Right? These animals would never go together in a regular jungle. They'd attack each other.
Right.
So that's part one. Part two is why did the Egyptians deserve this? Right? Why do they this kind of Midakinam, like one for one. What's the punishment that they deserve this for? And the third one was why did the sorcerers or magicians or whatever we're calling them, why did attempt to it? So he says, Omnam chada metoretzet. So he says chada metoretzet v'yera chavrata. He says actually, if we look at it, we actually have to look at, even though a lot of the time you may say that these questions are not really necessarily related. He says we can actually, each one of them answers the other one. And as we all said, Yonatan ben Uziel explains that Arov equals Urbuvia. If you look in the Yonatan ben Uziel in this week's Parshat, he says Arov, Irbuvia chevat bara v'chevat bara. He says it's like a complete, if you will, a chillent of animals, right? Basically a complete disarray of animals, meaning that they were confusion themselves, right? What would happen in a normal animal herd? A normal animal herd is that the bears stay together, the lions stay together, the giraffes stay together, right? That would be a normal herd. Here, everything was confused. So we're beyond just the confusion is already in the fact that there was a disorder or confusion with the herds. So he says, even if they would not be confused, meaning they would have killed the Egyptians just the same. So why do we have to make a point saying is that it's an erbuvia? I mean, why do we have to say that the herds were confused, right? Whether they were in an orderly fashion and the lions went in a straight line and the tigers went in a straight line, they'd still go out and kill the Egyptians. It makes no difference to me whether they were all in one pack or they were all mixed up. It makes, right, from a plague perspective, who cares? So he says, Tzarich lomar shamaka haizo shtei ra'ot asta behem. This makah actually harmed the Egyptians in two different ways. And this is, achati, one of them is Chaitao Reget Bahem, that it would kill them themselves. Right? If they want, we know that this plague was the first time when they really started dying, meaning the Egyptians started dying. So if that was the case, we didn't need them to be what? They didn't need the confusion. I just need what? I just need them to be killed, right? So they don't need to be, if I'm only going out to kill the Egyptians, what don't I need? I need one animal. I need a group of lions to go out, kill the Egyptians, and we're done. Right? So he says, the second part of this plague is the Ita Bazar. This is one thing that we have to, Zohar Kodesh says, the Arba of Lon called Zina Chochmat Lihon. The Makah was not only caused confusion in all the Egyptians in their witchcraft. The Lo Yachlim Dapka, right? They could no longer access any of their powers. What do we know about the Egyptians? When it says in the Psukim, and to just make an introduction and then I'll explain it, but he says that when the Psukim describe that what the magicians were doing. It says,
Belatehem.
Belatehem. What's a belatehem?
Lahat is like sorcery.
Sorcery. What does sorcery mean?
Lahat
It means
means-
quietly. They were doing it quietly. They were the words, right? So if you
Balat.
Balat, right? They were doing it in secrecy. Why were they doing it in secrecy? So they're doing it in secrecy. This is all based on the Zohar, not something like I'm just making this up. It's based on the Zohar. They were doing it basically as, how could they remake all the makot? They can remake the makot because they were in those days, they were like the chemists, right? Like, what does a chemist do? He knows the power, he knows the dimensions of all these different elements. He puts the elements together in a certain amount of each kind of thing. And by doing it, let's just say they wanted to make, oxygen. So they take, right, 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen, make water, 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen, put it together, and they can make water, right? So but they never revealed to anyone else how they did it. They just did it. They did it quietly, and they're like, oh, poof, I have water. Oh, wow, that's cool, right? Or the same thing, like if they had to remake blood, or they have to make something. So maybe they didn't make blood the way it looked like blood, the way that Moshe or Hashem made blood, but they made blood to make it look like it was, they did.
Kind of like Paro sneaking out behind
Exactly.
the throne to go to the
Exactly, same exact thing. So he was saying the balat to him. So now he says, Nitba'im kain makat arov was not only the wild beast, but actually here, Nitbalbu kolak shafim v'charishim shel Mitzrayim. All the witchcraft that they knew, they said, okay, if I want to create a lion, or I want to create water, or I want to create blood, I could do it. But all of a sudden, all the elements that the Zera Shimshon is based on the Zohar, saying all the elements that they knew, all the recipes that they knew, all of a sudden got confused. And he says, they couldn't even do anything. V'kama gadlu ma'aseh Hashem, and this is how great Hashem's deeds were. First he brings upon them the kinim. They could do some sort of witchcraft or whatever it is to imitate it. Because there, in the case of the kinim, it's such a small, minute little animal, such a small little bug. They didn't even have to it wasn't a big deal for them. Then they was able to they could show that they said, okay, we can sort of kind of control it. Right? And this is why Hashem said, now you want me to show your powers? I'm going to show you my powers. My powers are, I'm going to mix all the elements. I'm going to mix all the beasts. I'm going to change everything. I'm not just putting one animal, because if I just put one animal, they may say, okay, we can recreate that. But here I'm changing the entire, like the statement, I'm changing the entire world order. Hashem is saying I'm doing something completely, everything is going to be different. So that when you think that you can recreate a lion or you can recreate a bear, I'm going to do something different so that way you can't even, if you try to put the elements together, you won't get it because the elements are going to be, your recipe for whatever you're doing is confused. And then he says...
So you're saying that the added value of having the mixed up chayot was besides the fact that they killed them, it's also to show them that they don't have the strength to
So he's saying,
reverse engineer.
Right, exactly. So it's exactly that. So he's saying is two things. One is the wild beasts themselves. In a normal day in the jungle or wherever the wild, animals would never go together, right? Because animals go in a herd, right? Lions go together.
It's like lions and cheetahs are compete. They won't stick together.
Exactly.
They'll kill each other's cubs.
Right. In this case, they did is they acted.
Little bit buffalo and the lions.
Right.
So exactly that. So the order was Hashem said, you think that the lions and the bears can live, will eat each other? No, I'm going to set it up that they're not only not going to eat each other, they're going to mix up each other. I'm going to mix them into the one big Mitzrayim, and they're going to go out and kill you. Even though they normally do what? They would go out and kill themselves. So he said that's part one. The second part is, like you said, is they're not going to be able to reverse engineer the entire process because I'm changing the process. I'm mixing up the process so they can't even do. I can't even do anything.
Were too small.
What? The kinim were too small, and here he's saying is now you try something a little. You think the kinim are easy? Okay, no problem. I'll show you something bigger. And then he says, "They're moz al herbuv shabalim al." To hint at the confusion that came from a bechot matam v'zel shelo batku b'shar makot lidamot l'moshe. This is why after this one they can no longer. After this they never try to do another makkah. And in fact. And in fact, if we look at what does it say here, what count
is this?
This is what?
The count of the makkah.
This is dam kinim arov is number 3.
4.
Yeah. What?
4. Kinim is number 3.
I said dam. Oh, sorry. You're right. Sorry. Number 4. Excuse me.
4.
Apology. Okay, so now he says that we have basically is that Hashem was mixing up all the different forces, and now he says, "V'zeu she'amar hineni mashlich b'cha b'adecha v'amecha v'altecha et Ariel." I'm going to send. Now we can understand. He's saying is to how if we read the pasuk and we put what we just said into the pasuk, we'll kind of understand it. He says that hineni mashlich, I'm going to send upon you your servants, your people, your houses, the swarm of beasts. Shayu orgim bahem, meaning that the beasts themselves would kill the Egyptians. But we have a question. Lamu tzrach lavi arov, right? Why we have to bring all of these animals? We could have just brought halo b'min sagi echad, right? We could have just brought one. That's why lachen siyem hakatuv umalu batei mitzrayim, and the houses of the Egyptians will be filled with them. Klomar shebatei mitzrayim hayu meleim kshafim yimalu Hashem, right? The homes of the Egyptians were filled normally filled with kind of like sorcery and magic. Right now it's going to be filled with arov, this filled with this like whole disarray. V'atam shel arov hayakach, the remos shetayeh lahem erbuvia b'chochmata, meaning that while on a regular day the Egyptians would use their sorcery and their witchcraft on a day-to-day basis, here Hashem is saying is I'm going to fill your house with arov. Arov is not only the animals and the mixture of animals, but it's also the mixing up your the recipes. This is a beautiful piece. And he says, what do we know about animals themselves? What is it like? If you put a lion in the middle of
Jerusalem.
Yeah, the middle of Jerusalem, right? Like while in the middle of Jerusalem,
Plenty of lions.
right? He's not going to be able to survive. Why? Because he's not in his normal habitat. Right? Now if we read the pasuk again, that meaning the land was filled of sorcery. The more he's going to get to in a second, but he's going to something beautiful in a second. But he says the more sorcery that they had in their house, the more confusion that these animals were bringing into their house. Right? Now he says, it is not the way of kings to be involved in it. Right? The king himself, the Paro himself, wouldn't do the witchcraft. He'd call upon his sorcerers and say, "You do it." Right? Ella bevatecha, meaning it will be in your houses. Ratzalomar she'alu sham laharog. They'll enter into your house to kill the people. Then it's going to go into the people of Mitzrayim. Why? To ruin the whole witchcraft. He doesn't. I'm sorry. The piece that the other part that he mentions that's really beautiful. He says is that one of the things that Hashem did in order, and this is what based on the pasuk itself. The pasuk says, it says, "V'ha'aretz asher." What does he say here? What does he say? I just missed it. He says the. In the earlier part of this Torah, he says that not only were the chayot, the animals, coming in and getting confused, the land, their natural habitat that they are accustomed to, was brought with them too. Part of the nace was that they brought the actual natural habitat of the lion, of the bear, so that way they would not feel that they're like, oh, I can't go, like a deer in the headlights, right? When a deer gets stuck, he just stops. He's got nothing to do. So what happens? They brought the deer in the forest. Hashem brought the deer in the forest into Mitzrayim, so that way the deer would have nothing to do but one thing: kill the Mitzrayim. So he said, so the whole entire thing here was nace upon nace upon nace, and upon makah midah keneged midah. The whole point is that the Mitzrayim were not only were they getting punished for asking the Jews, which we said originally, the Midrash says that they're asking the Jews to go out and capture these wild animals, which we knew would be a recipe for disaster. Hashem said, that's easy. I got that part. Because all I have to do is send out one kind of animal, and I'll kill them, and then I'll kill the Egyptians. But here he's saying is I want the sorcerers to realize that whatever their mixtures and recipes that they think that they can do, and any magic that they can do, I'm going to undo the recipe, completely confuse everything, and confuse the herd mentality, which would otherwise be the way that a wild beast would work. Right? A wild beast would go with lions, and bears with bears. He says, no, we're going to bring everyone, mix it all together, and they won't go after each other. They'll go only after the Mitzrayim. And step 3 is that they're going to also do the Adama Asher. He says Adama
Asher Hemaleh.
Hashem Hemaleh means the ground that they were on, meaning that they'll take them from the forest. They'll bring the forest. Hashem is going to bring the forest with the animals into Mitzrayim, so that way then then they have nothing to do but to go out and kill. And that was the Makah of Arov. So Arov was not only Irbuv, meaning confusion of the animals, which would otherwise be very much organized. It's also the Arov means here. Arov is just a natural elements exactly, changing all the natural elements, and that's one of the.
It's totally comfortable in the city.
Exactly. So that was Arov. Now we're going to do.
Sphero, are you going to speak about the Sphero?
No. So the idea of the Sphirot is based on the Leshem Shvov Alachlama.
What's an example? So, for example, Dam would be Keter.
No, Dam would be Dam would Malchut, and Keter would be is Bakar Bachorot. The last three are the ones. If we look at the order, and if we start from Dam being the lowest, quote unquote, and the highest being Makah Bechorot, Dam is one let's call it more natural, something that we can sort of relate to. And then as you get up, and if you look at the Makot, and reading the Makot now, you'll start seeing is that there are certain things, little hints, not of the Sphira itself, but what the level of what is the response by either the Mitzrim or the magicians or Paro. Something is there that you're just like, oh, this is a little bit above, and slowly you start seeing, you're like, so that's why the one that's Makah Bechorot is the one that's, what do we know? Ani v'lo malach. Ani v'lo saraf, right? And the only person who can do it, the only thing that can really do Makah Bechorot is Hashem, because he's the keter, he's the big the big cheese. Okay, so now.
And the interesting thing is that they're broken into three parts. So Hashem says connected the three parts of a person.
Right. So there's a lot of different ways to connect it. The Leshem Shvov Achlama, who's the grandfather of Eliashiv alav Shalom. Right, so he says the reason why they broke it up into 7 and 3 is because of the Sfirot. The Sfirot of 7 and 3. That's how I got to it. Anyway, so let's do. I promised our good friend here that we're going to do something about worrying about people's pain. So I see last week he was here with a cast, and this week he's not with a cast. And I was wondering why. He's it must have been a miraculous recovery. He looked like
Merit of the Zera Shimshon.
Merit of the Zera Shimshon coming to the shear. He already miraculously the cast came off. Anyway, so we're going to do in the middle of we're skipping a few parshiot. We're going to go to Parshat B'Shalach, the first Torah of Parshat B'Shalach. This is when you need the second book. So, yeah. So he says, if we look in Parshat B'Shalach, the first Torah, it starts with the middle of the Torah. It says, "V'zeu sha'amar katuv v'lo Shamuel Moshe." See it?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's obviously from this week's Parsha. In the beginning of this week's Parsha, we know that there are the four languages of the four Lashonot Geulah: V'yitzalti, V'lakachti, V'ga'alti, Veveti, right. So V'otzeti, V'yitzalti, V'ga'alti, V'lakachti, Veveti. Right, there are four. Then some say there are five. Either way, there are four. There were four languages of redemption, and those four languages. That's the beginning of this week's parsha. But we also know that there's something that kind of takes place a little bit before that. We mentioned it last week in this last week's parsha. That we know that what does Hashem promise Avraham in the Brit Ben Abitarim? That Avraham is promised that they're going to serve how many years? 400 years. Very good. But all of a sudden,
210.
210. So we have a disparity of 190 years. So the question is, what are the Zera Shimshon is going to ask the question is what are the ramifications of getting taken out earlier? Okay, so now we're going to hold that in your head for a second, and now he's going to say in the middle of the Torah on Parshat B'Shalach, the first one, B'Shalach, the Torah Aleph. It says it. Where does it say?
Sag at the bottom.
Yeah, it says here V'yesh Lomar. Okay, no, V'yesh Zeu Shamar Katuv. Where is that?
That's what we want. Right there.
Here?
No, on the right, on the left.
On the left here. V'zeu, no, it's not different version.
Zera Shamar Kosev, Lo Yishmo.
Yeah, first page. That's it, where your fingers.
Here?
You're in Bo, that's why. Not
This is
B'Shalach.
Bo B'Shalach. Okay, so B'Shalach. There you go. I wonder why I'm confused. Anyways. Okay, so.
Outside.
Tortzag.
Right after Pesach.
Yeah, right after Pesach. So, okay, so I'll put my shameless plug again. February 11th, Charles or Shaul invites everyone to come to the Hilulah that he's having. He's coming in special for it, February 11th at the Abu Chatzera, yeah, with all the bottles of Ara. He's coming in special for it, and he's making a very big deal about it. So please make sure to put that on your calendar. Anyway, so it says in this week's parsha, it says that when he starts, what does Moshe do? Moshe says, I'm going to start, in the last week's parsha where he starts talking about the Geulah. He starts saying, I'm here to save you. Right? Right. Hold on a second. Now here we go. Now he says, what should have been the natural inclination of a person who says, Moshe, I'm here to save you?
People are about to save you.
What? I'm saying he says to people, he says, I'm here to save you. What? And they've been slaved for, let's just say they've been slaved for 150 years.
Show us a proof. Like,
Finally,
exactly. Right? If someone says, I'm here to save you, yeah, right, where have you been? Exactly. Adrabah. Right? And he says that the Surah Tovah, if I hear some good news, finally, after 100 and some odd years, I should have been, right? And he says, Kishmua Tovah Tidashen Atzen. He quotes, the Zera Shimshon quotes Mishlei, and he says, when a little piece of good news comes out, sometimes can dispel a lot of the bad news that we've been hearing, right? We can look at it this year, we look at this year, we hear a little bit of good news, dispels a lot of the not so good news that was going on.
Amen.
So he says, Yisrael hayu mityarim. So this is where it is. So it says, the Jewish people were afraid, the Bnei Israel were afraid. He said maybe what's going to happen is Hashem is cashing us out early, right? So we're going to leave early. And what happens if we leave early?
We still have 190 years.
We have 109 years to go. So that means that he's going to put the credit in the bank, and he's going to say, "Okay, Bnei Israel, I'm taking you out early, but that means that you owe me 190 years, right?" So that's what they were nervous about. He says they're nervous about the future. They're nervous about what's going to happen in the future. They're nervous that maybe Hashem's going to say one day, what's going to happen? One day he's going to say, "It's no problem. I got you out early. Now it's time to pay up." So here he says, what do we know about right before the Lo Shamuel Moshe? It says the Daled V'Shonot Geulah. V'Hotzeti V'Yitzalti V'Ga'alti. Right? It says, I'll take you out, each one of them. And it says, V'Hem Ramzim L'Galuyot. And the Jewish people, each one of the four Lashonot corresponds to one of the Galuyot.
Like
right?
in Daniel.
What?
Like in Daniel.
Yeah. Right. So it's quoted, it's based on the Balaturim, and it's also based on the Yerushalmi Masechet Pesachim. It says, Uktiv, Vayidaber Moshe Kenu Bnei Israel. Right? It says, Moshe says this to Bnei Israel, Shamar Lem Ken Mamash. Sheramaz Lem Aguyot. Moshe was reminding them or hinting to them of the four exiles. Ella, She'im Yitkarimu Bnei Israel Shelo Yachtu, Lo Yachod B'Galut. He said, Moshe says to them, yes, indeed, these four languages of these four languages of redemption also remind us to the four languages of exile, but under the condition that if you serve Hashem and you don't sin, then Hashem is saying your money's not good here. I'll take care of it. It's on me. Hashem says it's enough deal. In other words, you've suffered enough for those 210 years. The 90 extra years get wiped out. Meaning, Hashem, what B'nai Israel.
It's like you're in jail and you get out for good behavior.
Exactly. So Hashem said, Moshe is telling them,
hard work.
Yeah,
get out for free. Remember
right.
Monopoly.
Right, Monopoly. You get out of jail free. V'zeu shamar kadosh baruch hu. Vayetzavemu b'nei Israel vel paro melech v'sham lotzir b'nei Israel b'eretz Yisrael. That's this week's parsha. And he says, why did Hashem have to command Moshe and Aaron regarding the Jewish people to take them out of Mitzrayim? She'Yisrael lo hayu kol kach rotzim latzit mi'irazo. B'nei Israel didn't want to leave. They were so nervous about the fact that this 190 years thing is going to be over their head that they didn't want to leave because they're like, I don't want me or anyone, I don't want to be in pain now. I'd rather be in pain now because I'm already in it than have to worry about it, or my kids or my grandkids or my great-grandkids have to worry about it down the line. Right? They're scared of the future. Right? They're
back to Mitzrayim. Go back.
Right. So it says, then now we can understand why right? Paro's regret about freeing the Bnei Israel. Right now, if we look back at Parshat Parshat, what does Paro say? Paro says, what do we do? Why do we leave them out? Why do we let them out? Right? Bevadai Yisrael yu avadim pa'am acheret le'ezem umah kadesh tashlum 430 shana. Right? He says, or 100, 400, right? He says, Mazot osanu ki shalachnu Yisrael be'avdenu v'shlam im yu b'nei chorim lo yiti omer klum. Right? It would not have said anything, but since they stand to, meaning Paro is saying is, why did I do this? Right? They want to stay.
Right.
Why did I do this? They want to stay. Otherwise, what's going to happen is some other exile, some other guy is going to do it. I might as well be the guy who's in charge. Let them stay. Let them. They owe me 190 years.
If they need to be punished, let me be the
Let me do the guy. Let me be administrating the punishment. He said, that's why it says. Paro says to Moshe, "Look, the evil is opposite your face." Right? Paro says to him that Abraham chose that, as we know, Zera Shimshon says this many times. He says that Abraham chose for his descendants that in case they sin in the future, that the punishment of a galut, right, bimkom gehenom, that he says instead of having gehenom, Hashem, the Midrash says that Hashem gave Abraham the choice of what his punishment would, his children would be punished with. And as Abraham said, I'd rather them go through galut than have to go through gehenom. And it says, "V'im lo yashlimu zman galut ken chayvim gehenom." Right. So Paro says, if the Jews do not complete galut, so then what happens? Then we got to give them gehenom. V'atem rotzim latzet kodem zmanachem. And now you want to wish? Paro was no idiot. Paro says, wait a minute, you're trying to get them out early. So that means what? It means based on the agreement that Avram had with Hashem, what happens? If the agreement that Avram had with Hashem is that they're going to do galut they're going to do exile instead of Gehenom, you want to take them out early. So now what? I've got 190 years of Gehenom that they owe. So you want to take them out early on
But
that?
in the earlier section it says that if they behave, it will
Right.
be shortened.
Exactly. Right. So exactly. So he says, ki tiplu gehenom. Right. Look, you're going to fall into Gehenom. Uksharu Yisrael Mitzrayim rodfim acharayim. And then what happens? Bnei Israel at this moment, this is Shalach. So he says, Bnei Israel see them running after them. Because they say, wait a minute, they're running after us because what? The time hasn't come yet. So they're running after us because they want us to come, because we're nervous. 190 years are still on our shoulders. Where did we find that they spoke this manner? Let us be, and right. So he says, Ella vadai shamru lo shamru al Moshe mikotz haruach. Rather, they couldn't. They were concerned that because of the fact that they're going to get out early, they would have had to do what? They're going to have to endure and they're going to have to suffer in additional galuyot, exiles. It would have been better for us to serve. It would have been better to serve in Mitzrayim. Why? Right, exactly. Why? Better for us to serve there, because that way at least we know we've done our service, and our kids and our grandkids and whatever
will die from Gehenom.
When Moshe Amar lehem hityatzvu, it says not stand fast and don't worry. How does it, right? He says stand fast. What do he say? Hityatzvu Yeshuot Hashem. Hashem says stand. Moshe says to Bnei Israel, stand fast, look closely, and right of hityatzvu, stand strong. And he said, and you'll see that will never happen again. Klomar, hayeshua v'gula hi gulat olam, she'im lo yayu chotim ba'egel, hayalem cherut mishubut malchiyot, k'mo she'amru b'otim zurchanam libracha. In Eruv, in the Masechet Gemara in Eruv, it says that had Bnei Israel not sinned with the Chet HaEgel, there would be no more galuyot. They would have been freed of all the galuyot. The Chet HaEgel, that was one of it's a fascinating thing. Meaning Moshe is telling Bnei Israel, even though we're looking at Parshat Pashalach, but we can look at it from the lens of this week's parsha already. He's saying Moshe is telling Bnei Israel, you're nervous. I get it. It makes sense to be nervous because what? You have 210 years of service and you don't want anyone else to suffer for 190 years. But Moshe is telling him, don't worry. If you don't sin, like you said, if you don't sin, it's all over. Right? Geulah straight up. Right? That's it. The original plan, what was the original plan? Right, exactly. The original plan was Mitzrayim, walk through the desert, boom, Har Sinai, done. Right? Eretz Yisrael, the next step. So what he's saying is that what Moshe was telling them already from the beginning, they couldn't hear it because they were nervous about the amount of the extra burden that they're going to have to pay, or someone down the line of the pain. So the pain feeling someone else's pain. This is what Bnei Israel was doing. They were feeling someone else's pain. They were feeling their children and their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren's pain, saying is we'd rather suffer now than them have to suffer later. Right? So that was the connection with the pain. I was feeling your pain, but look at that, your pain is gone. Okay, so that was number 2. Now,
Last week I was saying the other sure, that why the Moshe, that's also why the Moshe used what Hashem told him. Moshe asked him, what's your name? That I'll be what I will be.
right,
He's talking about future.
right.
The future will be good.
Yes, exactly.
Whatever it is, the future will be good.
Correct. That is correct. Now, okay, let's do.
That's the only certain thing that we.
Okay,
Now
we
might
did
not
someone
be
with
good.
the shadow
Past
off.
might not be
We
good,
did
but
the. We
future
did
will be
the.
good.
Okay, so now let's see. I always like to add. Parshat Va'era has the last one is a cute one, so I like to do it in case we. Yeah, we have a little bit of time. So we'll do the last one. It's a very short one. Parshat Va'era. So it says the last one of Parshat Va'era is a cute one. It's something that I've never seen it before, but it's got the little box at the end of it. Do you see it? It's like a box or lined up. There's letters lined up. Is that right?
Yeah, Kinim Shkilo.
Okay, right. So Yesh Latet Tam Lama.
Wait, it's Zayin, no?
Yeah, Yud Zayin.
Say again?
We're back to Va'era. Va'era. Yud Zayin.
Okay.
So he says like this. Yesh Latet Tam Lama b'makat hakinim v'ashchin v'achoshech lo matzinu behem ha'tsha'al paro kodem makah b'chol b'shar makot. We see 3 makot. He says so. There are 3 makot that don't get any warning from Hashem. Any warning to Paro. There are 3 of them. All the other 7, Hashem or Moshe comes to him and says, "Listen, Paro, I'm just giving you a warning. Something's going to happen." With kinim, with lice, with shchin, and with choshech, there aren't. Kinim is the lice, shchin is the boils, and choshech is the darkness. And he quotes the Ita B'Yalkut HaRuveni. The Yalkut HaRuveni is a midrash, and so the Shem is Sefer Pliyah, in the name of the Pliyah, which is a Kabbalistic word. He says, Shalosh Makot Hayim Shamshot B'Yachad Kinim Shchin V'Choshech. B'chol Makah Shimsha Achat Shimshu Shtayim Acherim Ima. Hari Kinim Shchin V'Choshech Klula Kol Achat V'Shloshtam Kazeh. So he says that these 3 makot are unique. He says that the Sefer Pliyah, which is a Kabbalistic interpretation interpretation on the Midrash, and he says that these three plagues are unique because they served every one of them together. What does that mean? He says that whenever one of these makkahs served as the primary, whichever one of them was the primary makkah, let's just as an example, kinim, which was the lice, right? Shimshu shtam acharet imad. The other 2 were sort of like support systems for the makkah. Meaning, so when you had kinim, you also had choshech and shchin. What does that mean? Now, if you look at a thing about logically, what happens when I get bitten by lice? I get boils, right?
Right.
Yeah, sure. I get like a little bump on my thing, right? I get a little mosquito bite, right?
Yeah.
I get a mosquito bite, right? Boils, not the boils. Well, hold on, right? But now I'm just thinking about this out loud now, right? I get little bumps, and when do the lice usually come out? At night. Choshech, shchin, kinim. So he's saying, right? You don't usually get lice. Lice don't usually come during the day. You can find the lice during the day in the school, right, or in camp, right? But you can't. But when do the lice usually annoy us most? At night. So he's saying is that the lice, and then if we look, and then he says every one of the makot.
It's also the 3rd, the 6th, and the 9th.
Right. So there's like
Which
a number of
is connected.
aspects of
Ferrets,
right.
swords, whatever.
So now if you look at what he was doing here, and you probably have it there too, you see that he says if you set up kinim the way it's spelled in the Chumash, which is kuf nun mem,
Nice.
and you set up shin chet nun, and choshech chet shin chaf sofit, right? If you look at it across or down, they're always the same.
Is that him or is that the Sefer Pliyah?
I'd have to look it up.
I think he quotes it.
He's quoting it, right?
But it's cool, like it's laid out perfectly.
Right. I think he's quoting. Yeah, he says Ad kan lashano. Right. So okay. And then he says Ufize lo haya yachol Moshe latrot al achat mehem levada. That's why Moshe couldn't say, "Hey, choshech is coming, kinim is coming, or shchin is coming," because it's actually not 1 makkah; it's 3 makot. Right. So it's achad shehu shalosh. Right. So what he's saying is There were two other makot that would serve together. What would happen if he would say Kinim is coming? He'd actually say Kinim is not coming. It's three. So he would look like he was almost like false or lying, God forbid. Right? So he says, right, he wouldn't be able to say he couldn't say, hey, three makot are coming, Shchin, Choshech, and Kinim are coming, because why? Because of the main makah, which was, let's say, Kinim, Choshech, and Shchin, were not the main makah, so he couldn't even predict the other way. Meaning, from one side, he couldn't say, hey, one makah is coming, because it's not three, it's actually three makot. But from the other side, he can't predict and say, it's really Kinim right now, but actually Shchin, boils and darkness are coming too, because Paro didn't even know about those yet. Meaning he couldn't even fathom that was going to happen. So what the Zera Shimshon, I just like it because it's a cute little thing, but he's really saying something much deeper. He's saying is that unlike all the other makot, which had some sort of warning from Moshe or from Hashem beforehand, these three are unique. Because they were like one, which was really packed with three makot together. But not only that, if we look at the makah, he's saying is that just the letters themselves line up so that they always, it's kind of like it shows you that they were always kind of in some ways connected.
It's interesting because like Kinim is like this overwhelming feeling of like body being like invaded and Shin as well, even more so. And then Choshech was apparently it wasn't just darkness; it was mamoshes.
Yeah,
it had a mamosh. It was a darkness. You felt it.
Yeah, no, but
not us. The Mitzvim felt it. We had almost of a sefer, but they had mamish Choshech.
Right. No, but in fact, it says vayamesh Choshech.
They felt it.
Right. They felt the darkness.
It affected their body.
It was paralyzed.
Yeah, they could move. Exactly. It's not like they could stumble around. It was stuck.
The Chumash says, the Torah says, vayamesh Choshech. They could feel the darkness. And
that's the lashon. Yeah.
Right. They could feel it, and not only that they were paralyzed by it. They were paralyzed. They couldn't even move. There was such bad darkness. Right, you've been in dark rooms before. Usually, you feel like you can get your way around.
It is a crazy feeling initially.
Yeah.
You get used to it.
Right, but this
they could never get used to. That's the same with the Kinim and the Shchin. You never want to get used to it.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
But the Peladik it shows Hashem's love because this is what he was doing to the Mitzvah. But for us, he was doing the opposite. He was giving us refuah again and again and again.
So that's I said I was going to do three. We actually maybe be able to get to.
Yeah, we have a few more minutes.
We have a few more minutes. Okay, so we've done. One we've done about the arov. One we've done about the general feeling of feeling someone else's pain. Then we did one about Shchin and Choshech and Kinim. How it was really so. And actually now, if you want to look at it that way, then you would actually say is that what there weren't 10 makot. There were actually three. There were 3 makot that were actually 9. So that was 9. So it's actually 16 makot. Because why? We have 7 makot that were just makot. And then 3 of them had 3 together, so it's 3 times 3 is 9, plus 7 is 16 makot. Anyway, so now we'll go to the makah of.
That is not an Haggadah.
What's that?
16
is not an option in the Haggadah, right? It's either a HUD, right? Anyway, so I'm going to tell this. I'm going to give this one outside only because it's a little bit long in the Zera Shimshon itself. But so we'll go to Makart Svardea, the frogs. So
we should have in mind learning for Ilya Nishmas. Ariel, and Bd'H and Emes.
What?
That these 3 he could not warn.
No, he couldn't warn them because each one of them had 3 of them. Each one of them had all the other 2 in it. So each one of those 3 had 3.
Okay.
So you got it? Meaning Kinim had a little bit of aspect of Choshech and Shchin inside of it. And Shchin had each one of had Kinim and Choshech inside of it. And Choshech had Kinim and Shchin inside of it.
Emes,
so the
Torah mitzvahs.
Okay.
Yes. Anyway, so now
I have him in mind.
Who's that? Tom? Oh.
Used to come to the show.
Yeah, he passed away. When?
Just now.
Oh wow.
Ilya Nishmas.
Wow.
And comes to his family.
Ariel.
Ariel? His mother's Ben Dori. I don't know what his father's name is.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that.
Let's find out his father. Ben Avram.
When is the I guess tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
11.
France.
Okay.
He was one of our long-term attendees.
Yeah, he was the guy with the cool shirts.
Yeah, and he sat, and Charles was always busy with him.
Yeah,
always on his right, sit on the right on the couch.
Yeah.
I've got video after video.
Was that as out of respect? It wasn't out of.
Sure.
No, it was respect. He was very good friends with him.
I would put up this week a video of him, Charles, like talking specifically.
And he had it was very very cool band. Okay, so anyways, let's have the learning for the Linui. All the learning we did, which should be Linui Shmato, but in general, so this Torah I'm going to go out Baal Peh, just so that we don't get stuck in the middle. So in Markat Svardeim, there's two midrashim. The two midrashim, they seemingly are not connected, but they obviously are connected in some way. So it says that the midrash says. This is Midrash Yud, if you want to go back to it at another time. There are two reasons why Hashem brought the Makav of Tzfardea. One reason is that the Mitzrim, the Yalkut Shimoni says that the Mitzrim asked to destroy a nation. It says, Mitzrim ikshula abeid umah she'atida lekabel Torah shenimshal l'mayim shenemar ho'yot tzamed yotluchu l'mayim yavo davar shegidlo b'chiyato b'mayim v'yipara mehem. So the one Midrash says that the Mitzrim wanted to do is to destroy a nation that was going to receive the Torah. And what do we know about the Torah? It's like water. It's compared to water, right? So the animal that lives in the water. What's an animal that lives in the water? The frog is going to come and take care of the. This is Drush Yud in Ve'era. And then that's part one, Midrash part one, and then Midrash part two. The second Midrash says that the Fisha Mitzrim minuat Yisrael latzud lahem shkatzim ramasim lachin aviu lahem tzvardim. He says that in the Shmot Rabbah says that the Mitzrim had appointed the Jews to do what? To go out and find bugs and creepy crawlers for them to eat. That is, the Jews, they were assigned the Jews to go do hunting for them. Like we saw in other Midrash, what did they say? They went to go out and hunt wild animals. So here, they went to go hunt little, creepy crawlers, because that's what the Mitzrim would eat. So that Hashem said, "Oh, you're doing that. I'm going to find you. I'm going to flip it over. And what animal eats the creepy crawlers? Frogs, right? We know frogs eat them. So frogs, he says, that's what we're going to do. So now, if we look at those two midrashim, we kind of say that how they connected, without going into too much of the. It ends up being the Zera Shimshon proves that it's two. Basically, it's two. It's a machloket based on between. Hold on. It's a machloket between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer as to what were they doing, what was the reasoning behind it, and it ends up being that. What does he say here? Right. Rabbi Akiva says that the makav that Tzfardea was one Tzfardea, and then once they got to Mitzrayim, they started hitting it, and we know it multiplied. Right? Paruva Yerubuva Yishvatzu. And then the Rabbi Eliezer ends up being that it says that there were many Tzfardim, there were many frogs there. Why? Because they wanted to separate. They wanted to prevent us from learning Torah. So Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion of the first midrash, which is that the Tzfardim came to as a kind of like a punishment to the Egyptians who were trying to destroy the nation that was going to go receive the Torah, which is compared to water, and therefore they have to have a lot of water and therefore a lot of frogs. And Rabbi Akiva ends up being Rabbi Akiva is the one. We have about 2 minutes, right? Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion that they were there that because Mitzrim were trying to the Mitzrim were trying to were punishing the Jews by making them hunt for shkatzim u'masim. So he says that they were going to have one that comes into Mitzrayim, one frog, and if you look at the Psukim, it actually says one place, it's one frog, right? But to Talat Tzfardea, one frog comes in, and then the frog comes in, and then as they hit it came out and multiplied. And so each one of them is of the opinion, one of the Rabbi Akiva and one of Rabbi Eliezer, and he says it has to do also with the fact that what is the one mitzvah that we have above the non-Jews, one of the mitzvot, kosher, right? So every time we don't eat not kosher, what happens? We get zchut. And what's the one thing that we can? So he said, Hashem says, Hashem was teaching Bnei Israel, not only teaching the Mitzrim a lesson, he's also teaching the Jews a lesson. You don't eat these creepy crawlers, so you're going to get the zchut. And for the same thing that you're going to get the zchut for, they're going to get punished for eating it. So they're going to get punished for not only trying to make you go out and pick it, but what were the Mitzrim really wanted to do? They wanted to cause them to sin. So Hashem says, you're trying to make my children try to sin. I'm going to make sure that you get punished with the thing that eats those things, and you're going to get punished hard. And then if you look now, if you look at the Psukim, it actually says that in this makav, as opposed to all other makot, it actually goes into their ovens, right? We know it goes into their ovens, into their bread, into everything, because every part of the shkatzim, the creepy crawlers, were every part of the Egyptians, every part of the Egyptians being. Baruch Adonai Olam, amen, amen.